Okay, so tell me a little bit about the armyworms. Where did they come from?
Well, this is the fall armyworm. So we always have to be specific and say the fall armyworm because it's a different species than the true armyworm, which occurs earlier in the summer and is a grass specialist. So feeds on wheat and corn primarily around here, many other grasses. The fall armyworm has a much broader host range, can feed on legumes, including double crop soybeans in our area and alfalfa, as well as a variety of forages and pastures. It came from the south, where specifically we don't know, but it is a tropical or subtropical species. And so when it invades this area, this part of the country, it means that something has happened to move them up here. Some weather events have facilitated them getting up here into the upper Midwest. And this infestation is spreading across Illinois, parts of Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Indiana.
Wow. So will they move in soybean fields? What species will these worms eat?
What species of plant?
Yes.
Oh, it's a broad range. And I think it's easier to think of them as an insect that will potentially attack most of our crops, including turf and homeowner, landscapes, than it is to list the crops that it doesn't feed on. And this is actually one of the biggest pests in the world. And if you look up fall armyworm in Africa, you'll see a lot of headlines of how that pest, which has been in Africa for about 5 years, is just destroying corn and other grains over there.
Wow. So what's the best way for a landowner or operator to scout for armyworms?
Well, it's relatively, when you have an outbreak like this, an infestation like this, which again is uncommon. It's the first time I've heard of it in 16 years at Purdue, and my colleague in agronomy has been here about twice that long and has never heard of this. So first of all, this is unusual. That's the first thing to keep in mind. But if there is an infestation, it'll be very apparent when walking into the field, particularly if you do it early in the morning or toward dusk. Those are the periods when they're more active than, middle of the day when the sun is up. What they want to do is avoid predators, and one of their big predators are birds. And birds are not active at night as a general rule. So that's when the caterpillars are most active, which is also the time for producers that do want to control them with insecticides to try to target periods around dusk or dawn when the caterpillars are active, dusk being preferable, because you'll have those fresh residues on there. Caterpillars will crawl on them or be hit directly with the spray, and you'll have a much larger chance of getting efficacious kill of the caterpillars.
Okay, you just answered one of my questions of when to apply a pesticide, but what should producers be using as a pesticide?
Right. Well, there's not a specific product name that I will give you. I'll refer you to our alfalfa insect control recommendations, and it has a long list of what's labeled for fall armyworm. What'll dictate what the producer chooses is how close they are to cutting and feeding this product to livestock, because there's a pre-grazing interval on all of these products. So if it's very soon that the producer is going to cut, or if it's livestock grazing on it, then you'll want to choose one of the products that has a 0 or 1 day interval pre-grazing. So those are important considerations I can't make a one size fits all recommendation on that one.
Right.
But I believe you have the link for that. And if you don't, I'll send it to you after this and you can put it in below the video.
Yeah, that'd be great. Is cutting, like, let's say you have an alfalfa field, is cutting that a treatment to try and get rid of them?
Well, it won't so much get rid of them as it will expose them to predators, make that environment less hospitable, and get them moving, get them out of the area. Some of them may stay and feed on the new growth, but typically that's not going to be enough to sustain the larger larvae. So cutting is definitely one approach. You'll minimize the damage. They will feed on the drying material, but not for very long. That's not what they want, really. They want that fresh growing material. And they'll get on the move, and you'll see a lot of birds come in. Birds, love these infestations. They really pound on them, and mice and voles and pretty much anything that can eat these caterpillars will eat them. It's not one of those caterpillars that's unpalatable, like a monarch caterpillar, for example.
Mm. Will the affected fields be able to recover?
Sorry, be able to cover. What do you mean?
To recover from the
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that depends. I don't like to give that answer, but it's
Right.
impossible to say unless you see the damage. If a plant is completely devoid of leaves, an alfalfa plant, some of them can still recover. That's a pretty tough plant. But yeah, it's difficult to say without seeing it. I would say that now, we're talking here on September the 2nd, and in most of Indiana, these infestations are pretty far along. The larvae are pretty large. So when the larvae are large, they're starting to pupate and they're ending their feeding. But those that are still feeding are feeding a lot. But they're also very difficult to kill with insecticides. So these are all considerations for growers. If they go out after seeing this or reading about it and they see fall armyworms, the large ones, don't expect to get 100% kill and great efficacy. You just won't. They're too big, and they're larger animals are tougher to kill with poison than smaller animals. That's true for insects. It's even true for weeds, actually. So getting them earlier, smaller, that's the key. And in some cases now that may be too late.
So in thinking for next year, how should producers prepare? Are these armyworms or the fall armyworms going to overwinter?
They won't overwinter here in Indiana. No, we're pretty well north of their overwintering zone, their happy line. So not going to have that. We can find fall armyworm in Indiana every year somewhere, but we must have had some unusual weather patterns, and I haven't heard anybody give a explanation for why we had so many. But we'll see them every year, just little spots here and there, feeding on corn that's pretty far along and feeding in the tassel in the world, but not causing economic damage. So it's not an Indiana pest that we really think about or talk about very much at all. And yeah, thankfully it doesn't overwinter here. It's a more of a warm weather animal. Like I said, tropical and subtropical is most of its distribution.
Well, those are all the questions that I had. Do you have any follow-up thoughts about the fall armyworms that you think producers should know?
Well, just one a question I've been getting a lot is, as these caterpillars pupate, and we're going to have moths in a couple weeks, 3 weeks, and some already that are going to mate and lay eggs, do we have to worry about rolling and continuing infestations? And what I've told people is I would definitely scout your fields in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, keep an eye on things, especially looking for young larvae. But I would not expect an infestation as large as this one, because with insect infestations like this, we see this boom and then we invariably see a crash. And that's because diseases start to take their toll when they're how densely packed the insects are. Predators really take a lot out of them, and we've sprayed a lot of them. So that next population is going to be quite reduced versus this one. So I don't want people to think that we're just going to have to, load up the sprayer and keep spraying for all of September and into October. That's not very likely to be the case. But having said that, some of those eggs will be laid here in Indiana and alfalfa again, and we'll want to take a look and make sure that we don't get caught again.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your input. Really appreciate you giving your time and your busy schedule. I think a lot of producers are going to find this very helpful. So Thank you so much for your time.
Great. You're welcome.
All right. Thanks. You have a good rest of your day.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.